According to Roman historian Suetonius, Nero's father was a man loathsome in every respect. After getting heavily drunk, he killed his freedman for refusing to drink as much as him. He deliberately ran over a child that was playing in the street. He pulled out an eye of a man who criticized him. He cheated on bankers and stole prize money from charioteers. The Emperor Tiberius charged him with treason, adultery, and incest with his sister. He died in 40 AD. Nero's mother, however, well, she wasn't much better either. Agrippina the Younger was the sister of Roman Emperor Caligula. In 39 AD, he accused her, along with another sister and their cousin, of plotting to kill him and exiled her. Nero was 2 years old and sent to live with his aunt. After Caligula's demise in 41 AD, Claudius, Agrippina's uncle, became the emperor, and Agrippina was allowed to return to Rome. She married a rich man who died in 47 AD. It was rumored that Agrippina poisoned him for the inheritance. She had a plan to marry Nero to Emperor Claudius's daughter, Octavia, but Octavia was already engaged to another man, so Agrippina accused that man of incest with his sister, and Claudius broke off the engagement. The man killed himself. Years later, Agrippina would order the murder of his brother for fear of revenge. Well, gods may do what cattle may not. On New Year's Day 49, Agrippina married her uncle, the Emperor Claudius, and became very influential and powerful. She persuaded Claudius to adopt Nero and make him an heir, and she arranged the marriage between Nero and his stepsister. Nero also had a younger stepbrother, Britannicus, whom Agrippina tried to isolate from his father. Later, Claudius started having second thoughts about making Nero his heir, and according to ancient sources, Agrippina poisoned him with mushrooms. She then sealed the palace and introduced Nero to soldiers and senators as the new emperor. When Nero was born, his father's friends came to congratulate him and express best wishes. According to Suetonius, he told them, "I don't think anything produced by me and Agrippina could possibly be good for the state or the people." In the year 54 AD, Nero was 16 years old. Still barefaced, he became the youngest Roman emperor. It seems that the first 5 years of his rule were rather successful. He got off to a good start with the senators when he promised to eliminate the ills of the old regime, to stop the corruption and to respect the privileges of the Senate and the senators. His initiative to establish local offices with the purpose of supervising the tax collectors was very popular, and even slaves got something. They were allowed to file complaints to authorities if they were mistreated. Some historians attribute those reforms more to his advisors, Burrus and Seneca, than to young Nero. At the beginning of his reign, his mother tried to rule through him or with him, and at first she did gain a lot of influence. She was allowed to hold court with the emperor by her side and to visit Senate meetings from behind a curtain. She was also depicted on the coins that Nero issued, an honor that usually belongs to the emperor. However, their relationship began to sour when Nero started having an affair with a freed slave girl, Claudia Acte. Agrippina saw it as a danger to her influence and strongly opposed it. She threatened to side with Nero's stepbrother Britannicus, who was, in her words, the true and worthy heir of his father's sovereignty. That was quite the change of mind from a few years ago, when she did everything to make Nero Claudius's successor. Well, that change of mind cost the young boy his life. Nero poisoned his stepbrother just before his 14th birthday. Soon after, he exiled his mother from the palace, and in 59 AD he had her killed. Reasons for this killing remain somewhat unclear, But according to one version, Nero had an affair with a married woman, which again, Agrippina did not approve. Also, the woman in question, Poppaea Sabina, taunted Nero for being mummy's boy. Whatever the reason, his plan was to get his mother on a specially designed ship whose deck would crash and it would sink. Under pretense of reconciliation, he invited Agrippina to a festival at some town near today's Naples. When she came, he arranged a collision between her galley and one of his captains. Then he offered her this self-sinking ship for the trip back home. The deck of the ship did crash, but Agrippina survived and swam to the shore. The whole plot with the sinking ship was designed to make her death look like an accident, because even in ancient Rome, matricide wasn't looked upon fondly. Now that the plan failed, Nero had to think on his feet. He accused Agrippina of plotting to kill him and sent assassins after her. Her supposed last words were, "Smite my womb." Nero's story, and he was sticking to it, was that she committed suicide after her plot was discovered. The year was 59, and the good years were over. Nero was 22 years old, and he had never shaved before. He was an orphan now. We don't know if he knew what his father had said when his friends congratulated him on the birth of his son, but some of those friends must have remembered. I don't think anything produced by me and Agrippina could possibly be good for the state or the people. Juvenalia, or the celebration of youth, were scenic games that Nero instituted in honor of his first shave. This represented the passage from boyhood into adulthood. His shaven hair was put into a golden ball and consecrated on the Capitol. All noble families were expected to attend the games and participate in either dancing or singing or some other artistic act. Young emperor's love for the performing arts was on full display. In year 60 AD, Nero began the construction of Domus Transitoria, House of Passage, an expensive palace which was meant to connect all of the imperial estates. In 62, his advisor Burrus died, and his relationship with the Senate started to deteriorate after he held his first treason trial and executed 2 of his political rivals. Soon after, his other advisor, Seneca, retired. Then Nero divorced his wife, Octavia, and banished her to some island. The Roman public resented him for that and protested, but instead of pulling back, Nero doubled down and accused Octavia of adultery and executed her. In 64, he married his freedman Pythagoras in a mock wedding ceremony in which Nero was the bride. His love for the dramatic and extravagant was on full display. On the 18th of July, 64 AD, the Great Fire of Rome began. It lasted for 6 days before subsiding, and then starting again for another 3 days. It probably began in one of the merchant shops that were selling flammable goods on the Aventine Hill above the Circus Maximus, an ancient chariot racing stadium, or in the wooden outer seating of the circus itself. Unfortunately, the night was windy, and it fanned the fire to catastrophic proportions. When it was over, 3 of Rome's 14 districts were completely destroyed, and 7 more severely damaged. Opinions on the cause of the fire were divided. Some thought it an accident, while others speculated that the arson was started on Nero's behalf, so that it would clear the space for his new palace, Golden House, which would include a 100-feet-tall statue of himself called Colossus of Nero. Suetonius and Cassius Dio claim that Nero sang in stage costume while the city burned. He did not play the fiddle. Tacitus, on the other hand, says that Nero was not in Rome at the time. According to him, Nero returned to Rome to organize a relief effort immediately upon hearing news of the fire, paying for the removal of bodies and debris with his own funds, opening his palaces to provide shelter for the homeless, and arranging the delivery of food supplies across the city to prevent starvation. If Tacitus is to be believed, what came after the fire makes Nero one of the biggest monsters in Rome's history, an antichrist, some would say. To remove suspicion from himself for the burning of Rome, he burned the people he knew no one would defend. He accused a small Jewish sect for the fire, and thus the organized persecution of Christians began. Nero threw them to the wild animals, crucified them, and burned them alive as human torches to light his gardens. Also, in the years to come, he killed his pregnant wife, then castrated and married a young boy who he thought looked like his dead wife. On the other hand, he began the reconstruction of the city with wider streets and brick houses. He also built a new palace complex known as Domus Aurea, or the Golden House. To make it all possible, he raised the taxes and devalued the Roman currency by decreasing the content of silver from almost pure to 90%, causing the first inflation in the empire's history. Sick of rising taxes, Gaius Julius Vindex, governor of Gaul, rebelled and called upon Servius Sulpicius Galba, governor of Hispania, to join him. Vindex was quickly defeated, but Galba gained a lot of support, even in Rome. Nero declared him a public enemy, but it was too late. Praetorian Guard, Senate, and even parts of the military turned on Nero. Nero decided it was time to run. He fled Rome with the intention to head for the east, where he was still popular. But he had to abandon that idea after some army officers refused to obey his commands, asking him, "Is it so dreadful a thing then to die?" He then went back to the palace and fell asleep. Around midnight he awoke to a completely empty palace and cried into a void, "Have I neither friend nor foe?" Meanwhile, the Senate declared him the enemy of Rome and sent soldiers after him. Nero found some freedmen still loyal to him and fled to a villa outside of the city. There, knowing the search party was closing in on him, he asked the men to kill him. They refused. The emperor, sad for himself and for the world, cried out, "What an artist dies in me." Then he took a dagger and stabbed himself in the throat. It was June 9th, 68 AD. Cassius Dio wrote, he had lived 30 years and 9 months, out of which he had ruled 13 years and 8 months. Of the descendants of Aeneas and of Augustus, he was the last. Almost everything we know about Nero comes from 3 ancient writers, Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio. The first 2 wrote about 50 years after Nero's death, and Cassius Dio wrote 150 years after his death. These histories were based on the writings of Nero's contemporaries, who mostly wrote negatively about Nero, but there were also some positive depictions of his reign. Those contemporaneous works are lost to us. All 3 writers were members of the upper classes of Roman society, and it's the upper classes that hated Nero the most. Tacitus actually wrote that lower classes and slaves mourned Nero's death. One slave did leave us his opinion, not very flattering though. Stoic philosopher Epictetus was a slave to Nero's scribe, and while he didn't comment on the nature of the emperor's reign, he did write that he found Nero to be a spoiled, angry, and unhappy man. While Nero's extravagant behavior, high taxes, and the inflation that he caused, and possibly his cruelty, angered the elite, it seems that he was popular among the people. Even if he did torture and kill Christians, well, they weren't exactly loved among the Romans. His fame was especially noticeable in the eastern provinces, where, after his death, legend arose that he was not actually dead, and he would return to reclaim his throne. One night, near the end of his life, Nero woke up in the middle of the night in cold sweat. After his heavy breathing calmed, he asked himself, and the night, "Am I the baddie?